Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I got back from a boring zoning summit, I expected quiet pastures and cold beer. Instead, I found a shiny fence slicing through my land and a smug HOA claiming it as theirs. They thought I'd roll over. They forgot one thing. I'm the damn land commissioner. I'd been gone for exactly 8 days. Just 1 week in Denver for an annual interdepartmental summit on land zoning and water rights. A boring but necessary affair. Being the county land commissioner for Silver Pine, Colorado meant I had to wear a lot of hats. Part bureaucrat, part arbiter, part mediator, and full-time babysitter for every local with a grudge and a fence post. I'd been looking forward to getting back to my 60 acres of inherited peace and pasture. My horses had more sense than half the people I dealt with on a regular basis. I pulled off the gravel county road just past sunset, tires crunching as my truck turned into the familiar winding path up toward my ranch house. Everything looked normal at first. The white oaks near the front gate, the faint glint of water from the southern creek, the sloping fields that wrapped around the barn like a protective arm. But then I saw it. A glint of metal fencing where no fencing had ever existed. I slowed to a crawl, the headlights cutting through the growing darkness like a searchlight. There it was. A brand new gleaming metal fence slicing across the southern edge of my property like someone had drawn a line on a map and decided to make it real. It ran parallel to the creek, my creek, where my grandfather used to water the horses and where I still kept one of the main livestock access points. The fence didn't just look new, it looked smug. I stepped out of the truck, gravel crunching under my boots, and approached on foot. A shiny green sign was zip-tied to the nearest post. It read, Private Recreation Zone, HOA residents only. My brow twitched. Standing near the newly installed gate was a man in a reflective vest and tactical boots. He had a badge clipped to his chest that said GAR Patrol. Golden Acres Reserve, of course. The HOA fortress of fake smiles and curated flower beds just east of my land. Their president, Karen Mitchell, had been pestering me for years to sell them the bottom 20 acres of my pasture. I declined every time, politely at first, then legally, then with the blunt clarity of a man who owned his land outright and didn't give a damn about their property values. The security guy gave me the kind of look usually reserved for trespassers. "Can I help you, sir?" I almost laughed. "You're standing on my property." He blinked, expressionless. "This zone is under temporary recreational protection by Golden Acres Reserve. We're protecting the creek from livestock contamination under community water safety guidelines." I raised both eyebrows so high I nearly pulled a muscle. "You fenced off my land while I was out of town." He kept his tone corporate. HOA filed a temporary stewardship claim. The area is being maintained for ecological compliance. You'll need to direct any disputes through the HOA mediation channel. In the meantime, access is limited. Access is limited on my own damn ranch. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Fence, sign, security guard, GPS coordinates. Then I got back in my truck, drove up to the house, unlocked the door, and went straight to my office. The file cabinet in the back still held everything I needed. My grandfather's deed, the full parcel map showing boundaries long before Golden Acres existed, water rights registration dated 1958, and the notarized ownership transfer to me from 2 decades ago. My land, my water, my rights. I scanned the documents into my laptop, created a time-stamped folder, and flagged it for legal use. Then I picked up the phone and made 2 calls. First, to the county zoning office. I didn't go through reception. I called Jim Mercer, head of enforcement, on his personal line. Jim picked up on the second ring, sounded surprised, then furious once I explained what I'd seen. Second, I called the district attorney's liaison for land abuse cases. We'd worked together on 2 major disputes involving fake utility easements. She promised to prioritize a review request and get back to me in the morning. It was nearing midnight when I sat back, rubbed my face, and stared at the footage of that smug little fence slicing through my pasture. I zoomed in on the sign again. Residents only. They really thought I'd just come home and accept that. Let them fence me off. Let them lie about temporary stewardship. Let them pretend the land commissioner doesn't know how to read a damn plat map. They had no idea who they'd just picked a fight with. By morning, the calm had burned off like early fog. I barely finished my first cup of coffee when the emails started rolling in. The county zoning office confirmed my parcel was clearly marked as privately owned agricultural land, with boundaries unchanged since 1976. No new claims, no development overlays, no stewardship filings, at least not officially. But then came the real kicker, an internal memo forwarded discreetly by Jim Mercer with a subject line that read, HOA Provisional Environmental Buffer, Zone 3C. Zone 3C was my southern pasture. Attached were scanned documents from Golden Acres Reserve HOA, filed just 5 days ago while I was still in Denver. According to their paperwork, the area had been labeled as unassigned watershed buffer with no current private claimant, an outright lie. They requested provisional custodianship for natural habitat protection during an ongoing cadastral update. Bureaucratic nonsense weaponized. And guess whose signature was at the bottom of the stewardship request? Karen Mitchell, president of the HOA. Her name was written in that pinched cursive style of people who overpractice penmanship but never honesty. I drove straight to the municipal records office, bypassed the front counter, and took the stairs 2 at a time. I had a full satchel of documents in one hand and a vein twitching in my forehead. The clerk recognized me immediately and wordlessly unlocked the back archives. Within 20 minutes, I'd stacked my own verified deed, the historic plat map, transfer affidavits, and even an old photograph of my grandfather on horseback near the same creek, now protected by a goddamn HOA. I scanned them all on their machine, digitally watermarked them, and had the clerk add them to the permanent public property registry. Then I made 3 hard copies, one for me, one for the county's legal counsel, and one for the next idiot who tried to say the land didn't belong to anyone. As I gathered the documents, the records clerk leaned over and whispered, "You know, this isn't the first time she's done something like this." I paused. Karen, the clerk nodded. A few months back, she filed a buffer claim on a lot near Route 36, said it was abandoned. Turns out the owner was in hospice. She built a jogging trail through it. I didn't respond, just thanked him and left. The sky had turned gunmetal gray by the time I parked outside the Golden Acres HOA office. It looked exactly as fake and smug as I remembered. Fake cobblestone, plastic ivy, and an over-polished Community Integrity Center plaque bolted beside the door. I didn't go inside. I had no intention of playing their game on their field. I stood just outside the cameras, pulled out my phone, and started recording a new video. This is Declan Ward, County Land Commissioner. This video is legal notice that any claims of custodianship over parcel 118C, southern pasture along the creek, are false. This land is privately owned, properly recorded, and under no jurisdiction of the Golden Acres HOA. I am initiating immediate legal counteraction. HOA members, consider this your warning. Your leadership is lying to you. Then I posted it, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, even Nextdoor, because I was feeling petty. Within an hour, it had over 4,000 views. At 2 in the afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a lawyer. Hers. He introduced himself in that too friendly, over-enunciated way that told me he was billing her for every second. We'd like to propose a dialogue regarding the current shared use misunderstanding along the southern border, he said. There's no misunderstanding, I replied. She lied. She filed a fraudulent custodianship request on private land, hoping the county wouldn't notice while the cadastral system updated. That's attempted land theft. You want dialogue? Talk to the DA. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. Mr. Ward, surely there's room for compromise. Our client's intentions were to steal my land, fence it off, and claim environmental moral high ground while trying to erase my name from the record. Save your pitch. I already filed a counterclaim, submitted documentation, and launched an internal investigation. Internal? I'm not just the landowner, I said. I'm the county land commissioner. You might want to Google that before your next call. I hung up. That evening, I received a fresh envelope taped to my gate. Inside, a printed flyer with a cheerful HOA letterhead. It read, Golden Acres invites our community members to a constructive dialogue this Thursday at the HOA Pavilion to discuss the future of the shared recreational buffer zone and environmental cooperation with neighboring properties. In the bottom corner, it had a smiling cartoon creek with sunglasses and the words, "Let's keep it natural." I pinned it to the barn wall with a pitchfork. 2 days. That's how long it took for things to go from illegally fenced pasture to full-on petty war. The morning after I posted the video, I went out to check on the horses. We've got a simple setup: open grazing near the creek, a few covered shelters, and a rotation system that's worked fine for over 2 decades. But when I rounded the south paddock, I saw the gate had been shut from the outside. Padlocked. Not by me. Worse still, my John Deere had 2 flat tires, not just low. Slashed. At first I thought maybe some bored kid got creative with a pocket knife, but the angle of the cuts told a different story. Deliberate. Clean. Like someone brought tools and took their time. I stood there for a long minute, jaw tight, before pulling out my phone to photograph everything. Then I got in my truck and drove the property line again. That goddamn fence still stood like a smug monument to suburban entitlement. New signs had been added, more polished, branded in HOA green and gold, like they were proud of it. One read: Ecological Recovery Zone. Animal access prohibited by Temporary Code 41C. That's not even a real ordinance. I'd know. I helped write most of them. Back at the house, I made a few calls. First to the sheriff's office to report the vandalism, and then to the County Animal Safety Board to document the blocked water access. Cutting off livestock from water wasn't just a civil issue. It bordered on animal cruelty. Late that afternoon, just as I was replacing one of the tractor tires, I saw a dusty gray SUV pull up to the edge of the property. A guy in a windbreaker stepped out, clipboard in hand. "You Mr. Ward?" he asked, already glancing around. "Depends who's asking." "Private Environmental Compliance Inspection," he said, holding up a laminated ID from some third-party firm with a forgettable name. "Filed via HOA Liaison, under Neighborhood Pollution Oversight Guidelines." "Oh, is that a real thing now?" I said, wiping my hands and walking toward him. "Or just another make-believe committee of concerned residents?" He didn't smile. "We received an anonymous complaint regarding your stables. Alleged runoff from manure piles entering the watershed. State law mandates I perform a preliminary observation." I folded my arms. "Do you have a warrant?" "No, sir. This is just a voluntary inspection to ensure environmental safety." "Then this is private land, and you're trespassing. You can take your clipboard and turn your hybrid right back toward HOA Fantasyland." He stood there, clearly not used to being stonewalled. "Sir, refusal may result in a formal complaint to the county." "Good. I happen to run the department that would receive it." There was a long pause. Then he backed off, grumbling something about non-cooperative landowners, and walked briskly back to his car. I stood there and watched him drive off, then turned on my heel and went straight inside. I wasn't angry, not really. That passed sometime around the first slashed tire. Now it was just cold, surgical focus. They wanted escalation? Fine. I'd play ball. I went through every file I had on the Golden Acres HOA, their original development applications, utility service requests, water allocation permits. I made a list of all the structures I remembered from my drone survey 6 months ago and compared it to the permits they'd filed. Several discrepancies popped up right away. Fencing that extended too far into county reserve, a retention pond that hadn't been registered properly, and, most interestingly, a secondary irrigation line that might be tapping into creek water without approval. By the time the sun set, I'd drafted 3 official notices, one to the HOA regarding unauthorized fencing and land encroachment, another to the County Environmental Office requesting a formal review of Golden Acres water usage, and a third to the Municipal Code Enforcement Department flagging several suspicious structures. I emailed all 3, CC'd the DA, BCC'd the press. I slept well that night. The next morning, I woke up to another envelope on my gate. No HOA letterhead this time. Just a single sheet of paper with the HOA's seal embossed like some medieval coat of arms. The message read, "Due to confirmed animal contamination concerns, protective fencing will remain in place until further notice. You may file an appeal via HOA Form 22C. It was taped to the gate with bright green washi tape. Washi tape. I stared at it, then started laughing so hard I nearly fell into the damn trough. I don't know what I found more offensive, the fake environmental violation they cooked up, or the fact they thought washi tape made it official. Either way, I was done playing defense. By 10 that morning, I was on the phone with the county legal office, authorizing an official violation review of the Golden Acres HOA. As land commissioner, I had the right to trigger a compliance audit if credible concerns were raised. Well, guess what? I had photos, documents, and one very enthusiastic spreadsheet of permit inconsistencies that practically lit up red. The formal review request included unauthorized fencing outside jurisdictional lines, failure to disclose non-compliant irrigation structures, improper use of signage implying jurisdiction beyond HOA boundaries, potential illegal diversion of water from a Class B protected stream. I filed it under emergency review, citing encroachment on private agricultural land and obstruction of livestock access to natural water sources. My name on the form carried enough weight to move it to the top of the queue. Less than 3 hours later, the HOA received its first notice of county review. By dinner, they got 2 more, one from the Water Rights Commission and one from the Environmental Oversight Division. I didn't even have to follow up. The departments had seen my video and were eager to jump on a case involving a rogue HOA pulling jurisdictional stunts. Around the same time, the local news station finally picked up the story. One of their junior reporters had been following HOA scandals around the state and reached out for an interview. I met her on the ridge behind my house, overlooking the fenced pasture. She did a walk and talk piece while I explained the history of the property, the attempted land grab, and the broader implications of HOAs acting beyond their limits. They aired the segment that night during the 10 o'clock broadcast. The headline read, "Commissioner's Land Fenced Without Permission, HOA Claims Temporary Stewardship." They showed drone footage of the fence, panned across the pasture, and then cut to a very awkward no comment from a visibly uncomfortable Karen. Mitchell caught coming out of her Lexus at the HOA office. The fallout started immediately. My phone buzzed nonstop with emails from residents inside Golden Acres, some apologetic, others outraged. One anonymous message read, "We didn't vote for this. Karen's been acting unilaterally for months. Please don't blame the rest of us." I wouldn't. But I would make sure the rest of them knew exactly how deep this went. The next day, I filed a formal request for HOA charter audit. That meant digging through their bylaws, minutes from board meetings, amendment votes, everything. I submitted the request through the county registrar, flagged it for conflict of interest review, and CC'd the state-level HOA regulatory board for good measure. That alone would keep Karen and her crew busy for weeks. Then I submitted a civil claim for trespass and encroachment, complete with photographic evidence, timestamps, and notarized statements from my neighbors confirming that the fence had been installed without notice or consultation. I made sure to include the padlocked gate, the fake ordinance signs, and the environmental inspector who tried to enter without cause. A process server delivered the papers to the HOA office the following morning. According to the clerk, Karen refused to come to the front desk and had someone else sign for them. I figured it wouldn't be long before she tried to reach out again. I was right. That afternoon, I got an email from her personal account. It was classic Karen, passive-aggressive, faux legal language, and just the right amount of gaslighting. "Mr. Ward, we regret that this misunderstanding has escalated. Our only goal was to preserve the shared ecosystem and prevent long-term damage to the watershed. We believe this can be resolved amicably with mutual respect and understanding." I replied with one sentence, "Remove the fence or I'll remove your charter." By the next morning, things had escalated on her end too. 2 men in bright orange vests showed up with a clipboard and a cheap city-issued SUV, code enforcement. They said they were following up on a complaint about unpermitted outbuildings and stormwater runoff from the old hayshed. I welcomed them in, offered coffee, and sat them down at the kitchen table with a binder full of signed permits going back 20 years. They were polite, even embarrassed. One of them said, "We've been getting a lot of calls from that HOA lately. Seems like they're trying to bury you in red tape." "Let 'em try," I said, flipping to a section marked Exemptions under Agricultural Grandfathering Statutes. I wrote half the damn red tape they're trying to wrap me in. By the end of the week, it was clear that Karen hadn't just bitten off more than she could chew. She'd swallowed the damn fence post. The audit I'd requested on the Golden Acres HOA charter had finally been greenlit. That meant their entire operation was now under the county microscope, and every form they'd ever filed was being sifted through by people who actually knew the difference between preservation initiative and money laundering. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I wanted to know how deep the rot went. And the rot? It was industrial grade. The first crack came from an unexpected place, a disgruntled HOA treasurer named Marshall. He reached out to me through an encrypted email, introducing himself as someone who wanted no part in the circus Karen was building. He claimed he had access to financial records that had never been publicly disclosed. I met him at a diner 2 towns over, middle-aged guy, rumpled khakis, sweat stains down his back. Clearly terrified, but just pissed off enough to push through it. He slid a USB across the table inside a napkin. "These are the books," he said. Or, well, the real ones. Karen's been running a second ledger. I raised an eyebrow. And nobody questioned that? "She called it the Ecological Discretionary Fund," he muttered. "Told the board it was for quick response environmental needs. You know, native plant restoration, soil testing, stormwater mitigation." And what was it actually used for? Lawn sculptures, hardscaping around her pool, a soundproof fence behind her bedroom. She even paid a contractor, her cousin, to install solar lighting down her backyard path and build it as creekside safety illumination. I took the drive home and plugged it into my offline laptop. Within minutes, I had a list of unregistered disbursements totaling over $90,000 across 18 months, all from a so-called eco-fund that had zero legal standing under the HOA charter. Most of the expenditures were for personal property upgrades to her own home. A few were sketchy landscaping invoices with no matching vendor IDs. It was all there, in painfully neat rows: date, amount, memo, signature. And guess who signed off every time? Karen, Preserve the Creek, Mitchell. I packaged everything into a formal complaint and submitted it to the district attorney's fraud unit. Then I sent a separate copy to the state's Department of HOA Oversight, just for good measure. But that wasn't even the worst of it. One of my interns, Angela, sharp as barbed wire and twice as dangerous, had been combing through the land use requests submitted in the past 6 months. She flagged a peculiar memo buried in a water rights filing from HOA Zone 4, a letter of intent from a private developer called Sunrise Capital Group. The memo, signed by Karen and 2 other board members, stated that if adjacent non-claimed land along the Southern Creek buffer became available, Sunrise Capital would be granted first right of refusal for development bids, specifically for modular eco-conscious townhomes. I stared at the scanned PDF for a long time. It had a watermark from the HOA's legal office and a timestamp dated 2 weeks before the fence went up. There it was: motive, timeline, and a paper trail. Karen had never been trying to protect the land. She was staging a quiet acquisition, using fake environmental stewardship claims to fence off territory, claim it was unassigned, and eventually hand it over to a developer. And the fence? It was just phase 1. That night, I scheduled an emergency press conference. Standing in front of my barn, backed by rolling fields and my grandfather's old windmill creaking in the wind, I laid it all out for the cameras. The eco-fund fraud, the fake creek protection, the developer memo, and the hijacked HOA finances. "We are not dealing with a zoning misunderstanding," I said, looking straight into the lens. "We are dealing with a coordinated abuse of authority, financial fraud, and an attempted illegal land grab." The segment aired statewide. Karen's name trended on local Twitter under the hashtag #SoxCreekGate by morning. By noon, HOA board members started jumping ship. 2 issued public statements. One said, "I was not made aware of the Sunrise memo until yesterday. I demand a full audit of our operations." The other simply resigned, citing personal stress. Karen, silent. But silence doesn't stop the law. The DA's office confirmed the receipt of the fraud packet and opened a formal investigation. County zoning launched a parallel probe into the memo's legality. And my inbox filled with messages from other HOA residents, many of them begging for help or forgiveness. Funny how fast people change sides when the waters rise. The county hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday. It had rained the night before, and the courthouse steps were still damp when I arrived just after 8. A local news van was already parked near the curb, antenna raised like a flag. This wasn't just about my land anymore. It was about everything. The chamber was packed, not just with reporters and legal reps, but with residents from Golden Acres, too. Some looked angry, others embarrassed. A few had that blank suburban stare of people who realized their monthly HOA dues were funding one woman's backyard spa. Karen arrived just before the start, dressed like she was going to a funeral. Black blazer, pearls, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She avoided my gaze, but I could see the twitch in her jaw when she sat across the room from me, flanked by 2 attorneys and one bored-looking HOA secretary. The chairwoman of the oversight panel called us to order. "We're here today to address claims of unauthorized land use, misappropriation of community funds, and alleged fraudulent filings by the board of the Golden Acres Reserve HOA. First came the property dispute. I presented my documentation, original deed, water rights registration, photographic evidence of the fence, timestamps from the day it went up, video of the guard denying me access. The panel nodded along. They'd seen it all in the file, but now it was real. Karen's attorney gave a limp defense, suggesting the area had been unclaimed buffer zone during a mapping update, and that the HOA was merely exercising due diligence in environmental stewardship. I leaned forward. So, your due diligence includes locking livestock out of their water source and fabricating ordinances. The room got quiet. The panel moved on to the Eco Fund. That was the fun part. I submitted the second ledger, the one from Marshall, the former treasurer. It had line items like silt filtration consulting, listed next to charges for imported stone for Karen's koi pond. One entry simply read, backyard beautification, drought-tolerant foliage, $4,300, charged to the HOA. Karen tried to play the victim. We were operating in the community's best interests. I believed the fund allowed for discretionary improvement projects. One of the panel members raised an eyebrow. Including a soundproof fence behind your master suite. Karen hesitated, then said something about shared visual aesthetics and noise pollution abatement. The smirk on my face could have powered a wind turbine. Then came the bombshell. I submitted the Sunrise Capital memo, the scanned PDF showing her agreement to prioritize development access upon control of southern border parcels. Karen's lawyer tried to object, saying the memo was exploratory and non-binding, but the panel wasn't buying it. The document was time-stamped, referenced by her own signature, and matched language from the HOA's public minutes, minus the parts she omitted, of course. And then, just when she looked ready to crumble, a new witness was called. Angela, my intern. She'd subpoenaed internal communications and pulled up an email thread between Karen and the developer, where Karen wrote, "The pasture will be cleared by end of quarter. Commissioner Ward is rural but stubborn. If we box him in with compliance inspections, he'll get tired. Just a matter of time." That line echoed through the room. You could feel the air shift. The board chairwoman leaned forward. "Ms. Mitchell, did you instruct the board to intentionally pressure Mr. Ward into relinquishing his land?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. "I misunderstood the situation." "Did you also misunderstand when you falsified board minutes?" The chair continued, holding up a side-by-side comparison of an altered meeting log with signatures that, upon handwriting analysis, didn't match two actual board members' sign-ins. Karen's lawyer whispered something in her ear. She ignored him. "I may have made administrative assumptions," she said finally. "Are you admitting to submitting false documentation to the county?" Silence. The DA's representative seated in the front row stood up and asked to make a brief statement. "Given the evidence presented here today, our office is formally opening a criminal inquiry into fraudulent land claims, financial misconduct, and falsification of public records." Karen's pearl necklace seemed to tighten around her throat all on its own. Before the hearing adjourned, the panel issued immediate sanctions, suspension of all HOA development activities, seizure of financial ledgers, and temporary appointment of a county-appointed trustee to oversee HOA operations. They called it an emergency intervention due to leadership misconduct and loss of public trust. I didn't smile when they read the decision. I just nodded once and collected my papers. As I walked out, a few Golden Acres residents approached me, not with apologies this time, but with relief. One man shook my hand and muttered, "Thank you. She's had this place by the throat for years." Outside, the cameras were waiting. I didn't say much, just 4 words. She picked the wrong property. The formal court proceedings began exactly 12 days after the hearing. Karen's legal team had filed 3 delay motions, all denied. The judge wasn't in the mood for games, and neither was I. The courtroom was full again, but this time, Karen didn't come dressed like a martyr. She wore corporate gray, her hair tighter than I'd ever seen it, and her expression was pure stone. No more smiles, no more PR polish. Just quiet dread under fluorescent lights. The civil claim was mine. Trespassing, land encroachment, loss of agricultural function, obstruction of water access, and malicious interference. But by then, the county had joined in with its own charges: environmental fraud, misuse of municipal grants, and falsification of county records. Karen's lawyers tried to mount a defense built around confusion. There was a mapping error, they said. A clerical oversight, a neighborly misunderstanding gone awry. But when the judge asked how her signature ended up on a stewardship request that claimed the land had no known owner, and how she spent over $90,000 from a fictitious eco-fund with no board vote, there wasn't much left to argue. Still, I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. The morning of our second session, I submitted a supplemental claim. My team had completed a quiet side audit of Karen's own property, her pristine modern farmhouse nestled comfortably near the northern tip of Golden Acres. Turns out, the queen of eco-conscious buffer zones had a few violations of her own. Her rear patio, complete with hot tub, privacy wall, and that fancy solar lighting she billed to the HOA, was built over the legal easement line, extending nearly 7 feet into a protected greenbelt. That greenbelt was designated as a non-encroachment slope stabilization zone, meant to prevent erosion down to the community pond. And she knew it. The original site plan, signed and dated, showed the boundary clear as day. I handed the evidence to the judge personally. Photos, permit records, satellite overlays. Karen's face didn't move, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Her lawyer tried to object, said the audit was retaliatory. The judge disagreed. He ruled the information admissible and ordered an immediate site inspection. Then, looking over his glasses at Karen, he added, "You've spent months invoking environmental protections while ignoring them on your own property. That irony isn't lost on this court." The room was silent, except for the click of a reporter's pen. By the final session, the decision was inevitable. Karen was found liable for trespassing, obstruction, and intentional interference with private land use. The HOA itself was fined for operating outside its jurisdiction and issuing illegal compliance orders. The court imposed a $100,000 judgment in my favor, covering damages, equipment loss, legal fees, and agricultural disruption, ordered the complete removal of the fence under sheriff's supervision, placed the HOA under temporary receivership with the county trustee maintaining control until a full member vote could be held, mandated an audit of all HOA-led environmental initiatives for the past 3 years. But the cherry on top? Karen was personally charged, civilly and criminally. No prison, but the plea deal came with 4 years probation, a ban on serving in any HOA board in the state of Colorado, and a $75,000 personal fine. Her house, now under violation, would require full structural rollback of the patio. If she didn't comply, the county would impose daily penalties until demolition was complete. She didn't speak when the verdict was read. She just sat there, stiff, staring ahead, like a ship's captain watching the ocean swallow the bow. As I left the courthouse, reporters swarmed me again. I gave one comment. Private land means just that. Private. And when you break the law to build your empire, don't be surprised when the foundation cracks. They took the fence down on a Tuesday. A county-hired demolition crew arrived just after sunrise, armed with bolt cutters, grinders, and a deputy sheriff sipping black coffee with a look that said, "I've been waiting for this." The whole thing took less than 4 hours. Section by section, the metal panels fell, stacked like fallen dominoes across my pasture. The green HOA recreation zone signs were tossed into the back of a pickup like yard sale junk nobody wanted. A local news team filmed the whole process. I didn't pose for interviews this time. I just stood at the fence line with my arms crossed, watching it all come down. The deputy walked over when they finished, handed me a clipboard, and said, "It's officially yours again." Not that it wasn't the whole time. I nodded, signed the form, and shook his hand. "Appreciate you." He grinned. "Hell of a sign you got there, by the way." I turned to look. Mounted on a cedar post near the newly restored gate was a fresh black and gold placard, custom-made and lacquered to shine in the Colorado sun. It read, "Private land you messed with the wrong commissioner." Below that, in smaller type, it cited the exact parcel code and water rights registration number, legal, permanent. Loud enough for anyone within 50 feet to get the message. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer and watched the horses wander freely across the southern pasture again, tails swishing, hooves sinking into the soil that had always been theirs. Karen didn't show up for the demolition. I heard from one of the remaining board members that she'd quietly sold her house 2 days before the ruling on the patio violations came through. Cash deal, Fast. No forwarding address. Golden Acres Reserve held a vote 3 weeks later. The HOA was dissolved, not restructured, not rebranded, dead. The residents petitioned the county to establish a voluntary neighborhood committee with no governing authority, just a group for potlucks and snow plowing. I even got invited to speak at the first meeting. I declined. Let them find their own way without someone trying to crown themselves queen of the cul-de-sac. Word spread. A few other rural property owners reached out, asking how I handled the situation, what steps I took, who I talked to, what to watch out for. One guy from up near Laramie emailed me, "You should write a damn manual. Maybe someday." For now, I've got pastures to restore, fences to rebuild the right way, and a community that finally learned what happens when you let power go unchecked. Every time I drive by that old fence line, I smile just a little, because it's empty now. Because it's mine, because it always was.